Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've been doing this show since October of 2012, I believe. At least this version of it. This is the sequel to the first radio show that we did. I don't think that we called it Doc and Lefty at first when I started coming on frequently.
I think it was something silly like Bertroche and Lubinus, and then you said, that sounds like a...
Well, I appreciate that, but I mean, your thing was the reasonable Republican for a while.
Oh yeah, for a while,
and then I would come
and then
on.
People would accuse me of not being reasonable. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, well, it's in the name, right?
It is. I am reasonable.
I don't know.
You're the one that's unreasonable.
I don't know what I can tell you. It's in the name. Ergo, but no, we've been doing this since October of 2012. I think that's correct. And the Syrian crisis has been going on now into its fifth year. It's been going on for 4 years. It just started its fifth year just here recently. We've been talking about the Syrian issue as long as we've had this show. And that's a horrendous thing to kind of think of, that it's been going on this long with no end in sight, with no political will anywhere in the region or anywhere between the parties or anywhere between the major powers, China, Russia, the United States, the European Union, to end it. And it is, as these sorts of things tend to do, created this humanitarian catastrophe that has been going on this entire time and has only now started to catch on. And so I guess the first question that I want you to think about, Doc, that I'm going to ask you is, we've both been following the Syrian thing. We've been following this refugee crisis. And you can't even call it a crisis. It's just a refugee situation that's been happening for 4 years and has now started to get traction. Do we think that now there's going to be some political will to get something done in Syria?
A couple of things about what you said that I want to point out. It's now being called a crisis. It's been a crisis since the beginning.
Yep.
The problem is it's now starting to affect Europe, and therefore it's a crisis. That's my opinion on it. This is an area that has always been volatile. All the way back to the Romans. The Romans have well-documented problems there all the time. And the other thing is this is a Sunni versus, is it Sunni or Sunni?
Sunni.
Sunni versus Shiite problem over there. And it's just escalating. And part of the problem is, one, we had the Taliban that was trying to set up.
Well, remember that the Assad regime are Alawites. I mean, they're backed by the Shia, but they're not Shia specifically.
But they're more of a secular nation. It's not a religious nation.
Yes,
it's a secular nation. So what happened in Afghanistan, which got the attention of everybody, is they're blowing up the Buddha statues. I mean, things that were, how old were they? 2,000 years old, something like that. So they're blowing them up. That got the world's attention. Everybody said that's bad. Nobody did anything until the towers came down. And then we did something and got rid of them. Well, what they did is they fought as long as they could there. And then they took their leadership over to Iraq, which is where we were, and started attacking us. Now, part of the thing is most of the troops over there that are fighting for ISIS aren't from that area. They are Muslim extremists streaming in from all over the world. And in fact, a lot of these extremists are now traveling, since Russia got involved in the war and started doing that, they are now traveling to Ukraine to fight for the Ukrainians against the Russians. This is something that is getting wider and wider and impacting more and more people. Hungary, and I might be incorrect. No, I am incorrect. Serbia just closed its borders. So we're not going to do this anymore. If you come here, you're not staying. We're going to ship you home, or you can just stay in the train station that we closed down. Hungary finally relented, but they're making people jump through so many hoops, they might as well be stranded.
And Denmark is having a problem now, people trying to get to Sweden.
Yes, and absolutely. And the problem is Denmark already has a major party whose only platform is to send Muslims back home.
Yeah. Germany is the same thing.
Yeah. And at least in Denmark, they're really gaining some power. Mm-hmm. So it begs the question, how many people can flee the Syrian refugee crisis? And two, and I think this is a legitimate question, how many of those people are terrorists that are going to then try to destroy the Western culture that they're going to, or to destroy buildings or foment terror. And this is a question I want to throw out to you. What do you do? What do you do in that case if you're allowing refugees in, but you really don't have a screening process to make sure that the population's safe?
The thing is, every NGO that has been screaming at the EU and
NGO is non-governmental organization,
right, and the US to help to open this up a little bit, or to take in refugees and to alleviate some of that pressure. All of them have said there's some kind of screening process has to be put in place. There isn't anybody that is looking at this in a responsible way that I've seen anyway, that in my reading about it, that is advocating for erasing all borders and erasing all checks because of that exact problem. This is the same, but here's my frustration with it, though. The argument that you've made is the same argument that's been made since this thing got started. This has been a messy war since the very beginning with respect to extremists and terrorists doing crazy things. That's why we didn't arm the good rebels in the first place back in 2012, because we didn't know who the good rebels were, and there was no efficient way to find out. So we've had 4 years to think about it, going on to 5. We've had the best minds, presumably, of all these different governments and all these different international experts that have been teasing over this problem for 4 years, and no one has come up with anything that looks like a real solution. I don't. Is it so complicated? Have we come across something that is so complicated that the best brains in political leadership around internationally can't come up with something? I mean, for crying out loud, the complexities of World War II were just as bad, if not worse, than this, and we figured that out eventually. I mean, it took a little bit longer.
But that took years and years.
Right. It took years and years and years of active fighting. But once the active fighting was done, I guess I shouldn't compare the two, because the peace plan for World War II was pretty horrible. In the initial stages, it was pretty rough. So there was a huge refugee problem with that too. I just don't know.
And
folks, my complete and total failure to explain anything right in those last 15 seconds is part and parcel a great example of how just complicated and brain-numbing this problem is.
Yes. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back right after. We're going to continue our discussion about Syria refugee crisis, and Lefty and I are going to try to come up with a solution. I don't know if we will, but we're going to give it a shot. Stay tuned for that. We'll be back right after this break.